Welcome to Athlon U. My name is Braden Gall. Follow me on the interwebs at Braden Gall.
And I'm Stephen Lassen. You can also follow me everywhere on the internet. Also, check out all my work at athlonsports.com.
Today, we're going to talk ACC season preview season, as a well-listened to podcast likes to call it. So we're going to talk about the ACC, all 17 teams, so it's going to be another big one. So buckle up. And honestly, I can't believe I'm saying this, but one of the most interesting elements is going to be Stanford and Cal. How about that?
That is a little bit surprising, I think, for most people to hear. We have talked all offseason that when you compare, Ron Rivera to Ferrari, there is some intrigue there, right? So, yeah, a lot of interesting things happen in the Bay Area this offseason.
Apparently, he's more like a bulldozer. So we'll see. We'll see. Stephen, if they go to the website, athlonsports.com, and they would like to pick up some handy-dandy summer reading material, as we are just weeks away from fantasy drafts, from training camps in the NFL, although I guess we're already at training. I've been to like 6 Titans practices, so we're already in the middle of training camps. And training camps across the SEC and ACC and Big 10 and Big 12. Where should people go and what should they find?
athlonsports.com or on newsstands nationally. So NFL, fantasy, and college football all on the newsstands right now for sale and up at the website. So you can go to athlonsports.com, click on magazines, takes you to our store. You can pick one of those. Also, we have some new magazines coming, including, I know Braden would love this, a Premier League preview magazine.
What?
I am a total idiot when it comes to this stuff. So it was great to get it, flip through it, and figure out what the heck all these teams and are all about. So, anyways,
dude, my Gunners were incredibly active this summer during the transfer window. That's an incredible piece of news for me. I can't wait.
They were the Texas Tech of the Premier League.
15-year-old Max Dowman already dominating preseason friendlies all over the globe for my Gunners.
Stockton?
Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please thumbs up, notifications turned on. You can see Steven's hilarious ACC shirt, and also this guy.
Yeah, he's our CEO.
He's everywhere.
Yeah, it's 5-hour energy. It's awesome.
Look at that guy everywhere. All the backs of the magazines. There we go. All right, so go pick up a magazine. It's awesome.
Let's just say not CEO. He's the owner of the company. So
there you go.
Yeah. But yeah, by the way, this shirt is like a. It's not. I guess it may be Throwback Thursday, but I had to bring it out. We were talking ACC. Got the old logos up here. Now Maryland is on the shirt, so that just gives you an idea of how old it is.
Throwback Tuesday. I like it.
Throwback Tuesday. Yes.
So we've got lots of stuff. We have lots of stuff to talk about in the ACC, and I do want to start with Stanford and Cal. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I want to start with Stanford and Cal. Lots of interesting reporting, of course, around Cal and sort of the power structure and how much everybody loved Justin Wilcox and all the things that he's done in terms of and really it's a fascinating list of positives, and it's why he's lasted so long, right? Like, hey, he's willing to adapt. Hey, he's got a clean program. Hey, he's willing to listen to the boosters. Hey, he's uneventful off the field, like just all kinds of really smart, good stuff that I think a program like Cal wants. And now they have a very new power structure, which Stanford is also implementing a new power structure where the general manager is going to have complete control over the football program for the most part, which is a little bit different than some of the other places in college football, certainly. But I find it interesting that at those two places, it has kind of come at the same time. I don't know if that's totally coincidental or if the rivals are learning from each other and had a bunch of transition both at head coach and AD and GM. I don't know why it's happened, but I find it really interesting that it's happening at both of these places. There are a few others in the country that are doing this, but I have a feeling that Ron Rivera is not okay with sort of like, hey, a little under 500, but like a clean program who's also good with the media, good with the fans, doesn't really rock the boat, clean program, all the good stuff. I'm not sure that matters anymore to Ron Rivera.
I don't know if you would have asked me 8 years ago if I would have said Stanford and Cal would have been at the forefront of some of the changes in college football. But here we are, talking about GMs for Stanford and Cal. I think to your point, this is, I think, obviously it's an important year for Stanford with the interim coach. Frank Wright just kind of stepping in for a season. They just hired a new AD, at Stanford. So we'll see how the Andrew Luck, new AD coaching search goes during the season. And for Cal, I think to your point on Wilcox, they feel very solid, but it also doesn't feel like there is a ton of upside here. Now, maybe Wilcox is just getting the most out of this program. He's never had a winning season in conference play, but they've been to 4 bowl games, and their best season was 8-5 back in 2019. So it's been a while. Granted, there was a lot of transition last year too that they are still navigating, but we can get into some of the things on California. I think there are some good things to this year that's interesting, but I also think there are some very concerning signs if you just followed the transfer portal window on Cal after spring practice.
Do you think this is a strategy that is good for programs that exist in a certain place? Like right now, we've got Stanford at 17th, and this is partly why I wanted to start with them, because we have Stanford 17th in our Athlon rankings for the ACC. We have Cal at 15. Wake is at 16, so you can kind of, after we're done with this, you can give us your thoughts on Wake Forest as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to start, because we've been starting at the bottom of these leagues. But I'm curious, is this because these are once proud programs that are trying to get back to where they want to be? Is it programs that are sort of middle to lower class, or maybe upper lower class power conference programs that don't necessarily invest in football traditionally the way, Ohio State or Alabama does? Is it situational, or is it sort of place in the hierarchy related? Where do you think about that?
That's a good question. I almost think kind of situational. I think maybe if I'm a Stanford or Cal fan, I do wonder if, Andrew Luck, Ron Rivera coming back are probably good things for the program. I mean, both these I know for Cal, resources have always been a challenge, getting the right resources to hire coaches, to keep them, to get the budget to recruit. There are some challenges in terms of academics. So hiring guys who have the right fit for the program to be the GM and make those decisions, I think could be a good thing. Also, like, how many cooks are in the kitchen here? Like, does GM head coach got to get along? Rivera, Andrew Luck are pretty obviously high profile former players, personalities. So I think it's probably like situational. Each program, like we see this now with Georgia, Kirby Smart hasn't hired a GM, but they've got a lot of guys on staff who kind of serve in some of those roles. And of course, the Kirby Smart is kind of the de facto GM. So each program's kind of doing their own thing with those kind of decisions.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm just curious, like, where in college football do we begin to see more of this? Is kind of where I'm trying to get to, right? Like, that's all I wanted to bring up with that. Mm-hmm. I just find it interesting, and I think, when I think of Cal, I think of sort of the mid-aughts with Jeff Tedford, and I think of Marshawn Lynch and Deshaun Jackson, and just like a lot of really interesting offensive teams. And Justin Wilcox, was he like a linebacker on those teams? I don't know.
Played at Oregon, right?
Oh, that's right. And so I think I just, that's what I think of with Cal. So, but I could also see Cal being very comfortable with the style of program that Wilcox is running, which is like super fan friendly and like, all the things we've already talked about. And so the difference being he hasn't won enough games, and maybe all of that stuff that is a good and a benefit on his resume is no longer valuable because winning is becoming the priority. So I don't know. I don't know what that means, but I think it's interesting. So
here's a random factoid, Braden. Do you remember Joe Ayoub, the quarterback at Cal?
Ayoab?
OOB.
Oh, okay. I was one letter off. All right, that was close.
At one point, and I think he still might be, he is the world record holder for throwing a paper airplane for the longest distance.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
How did you know that?
I read it in some random story like a couple years ago. So,
looking on the football field this year,
transition.
That was abrupt.
Speaking of paper airplanes, Devin Brown.
Well, Elijah Brown as well. Just a couple Browns out there. What can Brown do for you? Look, Stanford has 11 returning starters, 6 on defense, 5 on offense, according to the magazine. Cal only 3-3. And again, I think there's a lot more pressure on Justin Wilcox, and there's certainly no pressure on Frank Reich because he's not going to be the coach. But I do think this is an interesting, like Stanford's in an interesting place because their trajectory was to rebuild, and they were kind of doing that. Obviously, without being a big jerk face is sort of the goal of the rebuild. And so I don't know if this year is going to slow all that down or if the infrastructure Stanford's putting in place above the football program will kind of benefit them when they make the hire. Because there are some, like, they got 3 offensive linemen back. Like, there's some back-end talent on defense. Like, there's things to like about the Stanford team, relatively speaking, but it doesn't feel like they have any cohesion inside the locker room right now, unless Frank Reich is just that good at being a professional, maybe. I don't know.
I think the interesting thing about Stanford is you go back to last season, 2 wins in ACC play at Syracuse, and they somehow beat Louisville. Like, it sort of goes to the unpredictable nature of some of these middle kind of class teams in the ACC or to the back. You could see some upsets here and there. I think Stanford this year is all about finding answers, essentially. Like, you're finding some people you can start to build around in 2026 and beyond. You mentioned Elijah Brown. It's going to be his first full year as a starter, we think, if he beats out Ben Gulbranson, the Oregon State transfer. Michael Ford comes back at running back. I know they're very high on the true freshman receiver, John Anthony Hall. So I think for Stanford, it is about just finding people you can build around and we're sort of resetting the foundation because they've had so many transfers. David Bailey was on the team. He left for Texas Tech. Like, they just got to find some guys they can start to build around and kind of reset that foundation for next year and beyond for the new coach.
Yeah. And Cal, am I wrong to think that this could be the end for Wilcox?
I think there's definitely a chance. We talked through the record. I mean, I think at some point, even given the conference challenges and extra travel, I do think that they're not, like, 6-6 probably isn't going to be good enough for, with all the changes there. I think what's concerning though is if you look at just the production that they had last year, running back and receiver, totally cleaned out from the portal, including Jaden Ott, one of the best, I think, running backs in the country when he's healthy. So they've got a quarterback battle. Devin Brown transferring in from Ohio State. They got the freshman JKS. I probably won't bother saying his name because I know I'll butcher it, but he's highly touted. So there's reasons you could kind of talk yourself into this team. Like, they brought in some guys later. Wilcox maybe fix some things up on the defensive side. I don't love the Brian Harsin hired offensive coordinator, but maybe good defense. They could figure that out. They get some steady quarterback play. Maybe they could sneak back into a bowl game.
It feels like a last gasp here because it's like new everything, right? Like new, but also like they had so many close losses last year, and still had all that social media momentum early in the season. Just a dominating performance on Twitter. So it just, I'm kind of bummed out that I feel like there's like the writing's on the wall a little bit here. So
the Cal at Oregon State opener, some serious like Pac-12 after dark vibes there in the season opener on August 30th.
No question about that. What about, speaking of Pac-12 after dark, what about Jake Dickert taking over at Wake Forest?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting fit, isn't it? I mean, when this job came open after Dave Clawson retired, Jake Dickert's name was immediately thrown out there as one of the favorites, and sure enough, he landed there. I think Wake Forest has one of the most underrated players in the ACC in Damon Claiborne at running back, and I think he's probably going to get a heavy workload this year, and rightfully so. Big question mark at quarterback. Is it Robbie Ashford? Is it Deshaun Purdy? I think I'd go with Deshaun Purdy because I think you get some upside there. There's just a lot of turnover on the offensive line. You mentioned 4 starters back on defense. They've had, that side of the ball has been a question mark in recent years for Wake Forest. So I think, much like we talked about with Stanford, I think Wake Forest is about charting 2026 and beyond. The schedule is favorable enough. You can kind of talk yourself into maybe 6 wins here. But I think solving the quarterback, kind of resetting the foundation, and keep it in mind too, Dave Clawson got the most out of this roster. This is a really hard job. So Dickert is now taking over with all this transition and turnover. If he gets him to a bowl game in his first year, that's a good sign for Wake Forest.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. 35 points a game last year or something like that on defense. Allowed, not good, not great.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right, you've got Virginia at 14. I want you to tell me before we go back to the top and start talking Clemson here. And I'm just going to preview this part of this conversation. I have major changes to the top of the order of the list. This is one of the
Okay.
leagues. This is one of the leagues I think that I've changed my opinion on the most at the top. Where's the tier for your in your mind? Is it Virginia, Cal, Wake Forest, Stanford on the bottom tier?
I actually don't think Virginia's on the bottom tier. I think you could probably put Wake, Stanford, Cal maybe a step ahead of those two. I think Virginia, sort of previewing our conversation here, I think Virginia's got a chance to be sneaky, like 6 wins this year.
You're buying the progress from last year.
I am buying a very favorable schedule because that is Coastal Carolina, William and Mary, Stanford, Washington State, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech at home. They can get to 6 victories here.
Yeah.
I do like the pickup of Chandler Morris. He's bounced around TCU, Oklahoma, North Texas, put up big numbers last year. They've done some good things in the portal too to address some of their needs. Defense has been a question. Offensive line has been a question. Unfortunately, their starting left tackle tore his ACL in the spring, so they're kind of already shuffling some guys around. But make or break year, no Clemson, no Miami, no SMU, no Georgia Tech on the schedule. I think they can find a way to get to 6 wins.
Yeah, Chandler Morris might be the best quarterback they've had since Brendan Armstrong, and
Yeah.
got to find a pass rush on the defensive side of the ball. But 6 returning starters on that side, so maybe they can continue the progress. I'm with you. I don't buy the progress, but I buy the schedule. I think that's the right way to look at it. So we'll draw the line there then at the bottom, because I don't think Syracuse is on the same tier as Wake Forest and Cal and Stanford. I think
Agreed.
Syracuse is above that. 10 wins last year. All right, let's go to the top. And honestly, Lasso, like, we debated Ohio State and Penn State. We debated a lot in the SEC. There's obviously tons of debate in the Big 12. And this is the easiest one to pick. Clemson is the number 1 team in the ACC. I think they might actually be underrated nationally in our rankings. I might have them top 2 or 3 in the country. This feels like a different type. This feels like an old school college football team that has been building to get to this point, with a veteran quarterback, 4 offensive linemen returning, 14 total starters. They did do something in the portal for the first time, which is hilarious and fascinating. Just like a dash of portal on the recipe.
It's like putting a little bit of salt on the, when you're
But
getting ready, just a little bit.
Tom Allen is not as good as Brent Venables, but he's pretty damn good. And they go get him from Penn State. They've got All-American candidates on the defensive line, at linebacker, and the secondary. They got All-Americans at wide receiver. They might have the best quarterback-receiver combination coming into the season of anybody in America. There's just a lot to like about this Clemson team. No weaknesses at all. And we can poke fun at Dabo, but the guy knows how to build a team with momentum. And it's clear that they rebounded last year. And, man, they gave Texas a run until, like, that one long run in the fourth quarter of that game. They were there in a 1-touchdown game on the road in a playoff spot. So I think Clemson is super dangerous to win a national championship.
I think the question with Clemson is, and they sort of answered this last year, they had been kind of an annual contender for the national title. They took a little bit of a step back. Feels like they're back on the scene. Like, a little step back is basically going from like 4 to like 12 nationally. But it feels like they're a lot closer to 4 now. To your point, I think roster retention. You look at Cade Klubnik at quarterback, offensive line, receiving core, both in the top 10 of my national position rankings. Defense has taken a step back since Brent Venables left for Oklahoma. So they tried promoting Wes Goodwin. That didn't work out. They now have Tom Allen. I suspect they're going to be better on this side of the ball. They were 16th last year in the ACC at stopping the run. So how do you fix that? Change coordinators, you move some personnel around on the defensive front. There's not a ton of questions here. Like, I think when you look at this roster, if you're worried about how does Adam Randall transition from receiver to running back and some depth maybe here or there, you're in a pretty good spot. It took me 0 time to debate the top team in the ACC. It is Clemson. They are the clear favorite. And I think the expectation is not only to win the conference, they should be able to win a couple games in the playoff and potentially play for the national championship.
And like, if you're telling me the biggest concern is like, wow, who's going to be the starting running back? It's like, I don't care. They always find somebody. Yeah. They always find somebody to get like 1,100 yards. They're going to have a running back who's got 1,100 yards. But this is all about the offensive line, time for Cade Klubnik to throw, and 3 really talented receivers. Any one of whom could be, an all-ACC, all-American candidate.
They brought in also Tristan Smith from the transfer portal
Yeah.
to give them another weapon.
Wait, what?
So
Clemson?
yeah,
Clemson did that?
they brought in a starting defensive lineman too,
What?
and a linebacker. So totally
That's
Dabo.
That's a shopping spree.
Right.
Meanwhile, let's talk Bill Belichick in North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Look, I think this. I feel more. How about this? We'll call this the Tom Allen effect. I guess I don't know. I am more confident in Clemson being in the national championship game than I am Penn State.
I could make that argument because of the schedule. I mean, if you're Clemson, you get by LSU. I mean, I think they'll stumble once, but could they be 1 or 2 in the top 25 when the playoff is announced? You know, Penn State's got to go through Ohio State. They got to play Oregon. They got to go play the Big Ten championship game.
You talking about Penn State trying to win games against really elite top 5 teams? Because that hasn't really happened.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, like that concern, and also the path is a lot tougher for Penn State.
Yeah, I for some reason I trust Clemson more right now than I do Penn State, and you know how much I love the Penn State team. So it's really interesting. This Clemson team, very they might be number 3 in my rankings at the lowest right now nationally, maybe even as high as 2. So I think we could be looking at a playoff rematch from Texas and Clemson from last year, potentially in the national championship game. But we're not there yet, Stephen, with our national championship playoff picks. We'll do that in a couple of weeks. Number 2 on the list is the Miami Hurricanes in our rankings. 3 returning starters on offense, 4 on defense. Now, what's fascinating about this is they got to replace their top 5 pass catchers. They got to replace 3 offensive linemen. Their starting quarterback, who's the number 1 overall pick. Their running back, who I love, Damian Martinez. And they might actually be just as good on offense, potentially. Maybe not at the receiver position, but people are raving about this offensive line, even though it's kind of rebuilt. Ultimately, the defense, give up over 30 yards of play. They went and got a new coordinator. Ruben Bain is by far the best name of a defensive end in all of college football. It just sounds like a superhero. Yeah. But ultimately, this comes down to Carson Beck, and this is in our anonymous coach's scouting report in the magazine, which is like, we don't know if he's worth it. And some of that is the injury, and we just don't know how strong the arm is coming back. But I do think watching Carson Beck last year before the injury, there was sort of a, what am I watching? Is this the number 1 overall pick? Is this a top 10 pick? Or is this a product of losing some great players, McConkey and Bowers in particular, an offensive line that wasn't great, a tougher schedule? Like, what were we watching last year? Did he make some mistakes? Was it supporting cast? It's almost like we don't know how good he is, and our scouting report agrees with that. The coaches are saying we're not sure if he's worth $4 million.
Well, I would say he's probably worth $4 million simply because of the available talent in the portal. Like, that seems to be the going rate. Now, is it worth performance? We'll find out. I think a big part of the problem last year at Georgia was drops by receivers. That was a huge issue. I think they led the power conference teams in drops. I think what's also interesting is, I know if we're looking at Miami last year, Cam Ward, high-powered offense, they couldn't stop anybody. I think you might see a different Miami team to some extent. They may be more well-rounded, because I don't think they're going to be that bad on defense this year. They've recruited the ACC's best recruiting class now, like 3 years in a row.
Yep.
They brought in like 7 defensive backs to the portal. They changed coordinators to Corey Heatherman coming over from Minnesota. Ruben Bain back to 100% also makes a big deal too. So I think they are going to be better on defense. The question is how much better? And then I think offensively, their offensive line should be solid. I like their running backs too, even though I do agree with you, Martinez was pretty special. And I think it's going to take some time for these receivers to get kind of acclimated with Carson Beck. Now, they did make some noise late in the portal. Keelan Marion coming over from BYU, Tony Johnson from Cincinnati. They brought in a couple veterans. Malachi Toney's the true freshman that everybody seems to be raving about at Miami as a name to watch. So I think they have pieces. And how fast does this all come together? They're probably better on defense. They run the ball. They give Carson Beck time to get acclimated again. And if he's 100%, there's a chance that this team is in the college football playoff and playing for the ACC championship. The schedule is kind of tricky, but Miami's got the pieces to get there.
It's like, can you out-recruit your coaching deficiencies? is what this is all about, and it's not totally inaccurate about Penn State either. But what I think is interesting is I really agonized on who I would have it to, but I don't, even the teams that I really like, and everybody knows who we're about to talk about because I'm about to gush about a couple teams, but I'm not high on SMU, and I'm not as high on Duke this year in terms of replicating what they did last year. You guys know who I really like, but I still can't make the case that I think they are better than Miami. Miami's talent is so good that I think that they can overcome some deficiencies. But let's make no mistake, the coach cost him another game and a shot at the ACC championship last year again for the second year in a row. And so I don't know.
6-2 in the ACC last year. They were right there on the doorstep of playing for the ACC championship had they been able to stop Syracuse. You look at the other loss to Georgia Tech, by 5 points. They played right on the edge last year. So I think it's kind of, like we said, getting back to playing a little bit more complete ball. Maybe they're not as dynamic on offense, but the defense shows up. I think the point that you're making is, the confidence level in Miami. We picked them to make the magazine, picked them to make the playoff in the magazine. That last spot was one of the toughest calls. I think Miami's the second best team in the ACC, but also would it totally shock me if Georgia Tech gets there? No, I wouldn't. So how this all comes together is a very, very fascinating storyline in the ACC this season.
No question about it. It's hard though to make, like, even with the win by Georgia Tech last year, and even though I love that team this year, it's hard to make the case that Georgia Tech belongs ahead of Miami. Tough schedule for Tech as well. Same with Louisville. I really like Louisville, but hard to make the case that they're going to be better than Miami. Now, if Carson Beck's arm falls off or something in camp, like, that's a different story. But by all accounts, he's going to be ready to go. From what I've gathered, so hard to not have Miami at 2.
But Miami's schedule at Florida State, at SMU, and late in the season they play Virginia Tech and they play Pitt, both on the road. 2 cold weather environments they're going to be going up to in November. I think that schedule's tricky. So we looked last year, SMU made the ACC championship game. They were a good team, but they also had a favorable schedule. So I think Georgia Tech and I think Louisville both can get there to the ACC championship game.
Oh, maybe I'll change. Maybe I'll put Tech at 2 after all. All right, number 3 in the Athlon rankings, but not in my heart. SMU. I have major concerns about SMU being ranked this high. I don't have major concerns about the program, about the coaching staff and the boosters' commitment. And I like Jennings. I think he's a top 20 quarterback in the country. And there's a bunch of offensive linemen coming back, and they learned a lot last year. But that schedule is tougher this year. And the 3 games, I just want to read off some numbers here. And I know there's some context that you can add here, but Jennings was 15 of 32, below 50%, no touchdown, 4.5 yards per attempt against BYU in a loss. Clemson, he threw 50 passes, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, lost that game. That was a close game, though, in the ACC championship. And Penn State, of course, all I remember is the first half of that game where he was atrocious, throwing interceptions off his back foot, making terrible decisions. I think 2 pick sixes, I think. 55% completion percentage, 5.4 yards per attempt against Penn State, 6.1 against Clemson, 4.4 against BYU, lost all 3. What do those 3 have in common against SMU?
They had good defenses, yeah.
Much better in the trenches across the board. And those are the best 3 trench teams that SMU played last year. And all 3 of them, they lost. All 3 of them, Jennings was, we'll call him human, I guess. They don't use him a ton. He's not a big explosive runner. Like, that's not what he does. I have concerns about SMU with a slightly tougher schedule, 2 returning starters on defense, 6 on offense. I have concerns that SMU can maintain that elite level of competition, playoff level, conference championship game level. We've got them at 3, so we're not picking them to make it to the conference title game. But if you're asking me who I'm buying stock in right now, Louisville or Georgia Tech or SMU, SMU's last on the list. I would have SMU at 5 in the conference personally. Make your case.
I think I'm starting to get there.
Did I convince you?
Yeah, I have some concerns, some growing concerns. So I think there's staying power here at SMU. They are going to be fine. Like, they're not going to go from 11 wins to 6 wins, barring some like major injuries. I think with the combination of what Rhett Lashley's doing in the portal, what they're doing in the high school level, they've got enough talent to sort of overcome some of these losses. But I think Kevin Jennings is going to have to carry this team even more because they lost Brashard Smith, they lost some receivers, offensive line, defense, took some hits at every level. Look at their schedule. You mentioned those teams. I mean, they play Baylor and they're at TCU in non-conference play.
They could lose both those games.
They could lose both those, right? Yeah. They go to Clemson. They got to play Miami. They got to play Louisville. Also, they have to play at Cal and at Boston College. Weird things happen in the ACC.
Such a random game,
right?
SMU at Cal in an ACC game. I'm not ready for it. I'm not used to it yet.
I am not used to it either. But that is, I mean, throw out the record books when SMU at Cal meet in the last week of the regular season. So the schedule is tougher. Personnel losses. How far does Jennings carry this team? I think they're probably a top 30-ish team, but I think they do take a step back this year.
I agree. Ultimately, it's like if they do figure out the trenches and they do compete against the best teams, it is going to be a shining example of how in the modern world, boosters and dollars can help you elevate a program. I just have doubts about that happening. I could be totally wrong, and SMU could be awesome again. And I don't think it's all Jennings' fault. I think it's about the trenches. This is what you and I have talked about for decades. Literally almost 20 years now. The G5 trench warfare is just different on a week in, week out basis than it is at the power level. And I don't think you can do it in 1 year. And I don't know if you could do it in 2 years or 3 years. I don't know. But in the modern era, maybe you can do it much faster. And that's what we're going to find out. We're going to see. So they're fascinating to watch. And I enjoy Kevin Jennings and I enjoy the offense and I enjoy SMU. But I would have them at 5 in the conference. So
I would also on the offensive line, they do have quite a few like power conference like bounce backs. Like Addison Nichols was at Arkansas last year. He's moving to SMU. Some of the other guys there. One other name to keep in mind too, RJ Maryland, who was hurt last year, could be one of the better tight ends in the country. So coming back gives Jennings another weapon. But I still think pretty solid. I have concerns both sides of the ball, but just with a tougher schedule, it's hard to run. We come out of nowhere and then replicate it again. It just feels like they're a good regression candidate.
4 is the magic number for Louisville. Number 4 in our rankings. 4 returning starters on offense. 4 returning starters on defense. Jeff Brom only 4 losses in 2 seasons in the ACC. Obviously, Miller Moss comes over from USC. You expect Jeff Brom to work magic because that's all he does with quarterbacks. All he does is develop you into an all-conference player. And Miller Moss might be the most talented one he's had at Purdue or at Louisville. They've got great running backs. Got to figure out the offensive line. And, do I love Ron English as the defensive coordinator? I mean, okay, whatever. It's fine. But they got some good pieces in the front 7. They've been better on defense than we kind of have given them credit for over the years. Although they did give up a bunch of big plays last year in the secondary. I really like this Louisville team. I'm bullish on them, and I think 4th is kind of exactly where I've got them. And I think this is a team that could absolutely get to the conference championship game.
I think the hardest part about the Louisville discussion this offseason is Miller Moss and just how good is he? I mean, he was benched at USC. Was everything his fault? Probably not. I think when you just look at the track record there at Louisville, Tyler Shuck and Jack Plummer before the 2 quarterbacks that Jeff Brom has worked with in terms of transfers the last 2 years, I think he'll find a way to get the most out of Miller Moss. And I think they've got great receivers, great running backs. I think Isaac Brown's probably the running backs really underrated after a great freshman season. Defensively is where I have my concerns. A lot of big plays, like you mentioned in the secondary. They're retooling the defensive line. When I look at their schedule, they get Clemson at home, but SMU, Miami, and kind of a tricky early game at Pitt, all on the road. So there are some tricky games here. I think if I knew what to expect a little bit more out of Miller Moss, I think in the magazine, I would have had him 3rd over SMU.
I could see that. I could see that argument for sure. But that Louisville team is going to be really fun to watch. Number 5, my Jackets, Georgia Tech. I have them at 3. And I'm like, even sitting here, I'm going, shouldn't they be 2? Should they be 2? My Jackets, look, it's really strange to believe in a team and like not know what the future of the head coach will be long term, because interims don't normally work out long term other than the guy in the ACC. 5-3, 2 years in a row in the conference. Everybody knows what's coming back. Haynes King, super veteran, physical, leader, gritty, tough. Buster Faulkner, OC. You got a great running back in the backfield in Haynes. You got pretty decent wide receivers. You need a new offensive line there. Blake Gideon, first-time play caller on defense, is going to be fascinating. New secondary. I just 5 starters on offense, 4 on defense. I just think it's not an old-fashioned build like Clemson or even Pitt, which we're about to talk about. It's not like an old-fashioned build, but it's kind of close. And I just think they got the right pieces in the right place. Play callers, leadership, quarterback. I just, maybe Gideon has some growing pains, and that's the reason not to pick him to play in the conference championship game on defense. But he's a very highly sought-after name on that side of the ball, and they got him. There's just not a lot to – I mean, the schedule does have some major hurdles that they've got to clear, not the least of which is their arch rival at the end of the year. But it is – that doesn't affect their trip to the ACC championship game. So
Correct. They host Clemson. They do not play Miami. They do not play Louisville, and they do not play SMU. So I got
him at 3. I got him at 3, dude.
Yeah, I'm moving them up. So I think there's a school of thought we should talk about with the ACC that all these teams are going to beat up on each other to some extent. Like Georgia Tech could lose to at NC State, and there's going to be like these kind of losses. But if you're getting the preseason favorite at your place, and they just beat Miami last year, talking about Georgia Tech, and they don't play 3 of your other contenders, that is pretty favorable, especially in the 17 team. Everybody's in one freaking division era of college football. I think we should also just take a second to totally fine. Like I had a lot of skepticism about Brent Key when he was hired. I like what Georgia Tech is doing though on the commitment front, because they just signed Buster Faulkner to an extension. He's one of the top 10 OCs, paid OCs in college football. One of my favorite OCs to watch, all the creativity.
Maybe number one. Number one. Yeah.
That is a great sign for Georgia Tech to be able to invest and retain in their coordinators. So looking at this team this year, if I had to pick a dark horse, a wild card, sleeper, whatever you want to call it, to make the ACC championship game, it is Georgia Tech. Start with the offense. Haynes King coming back. Played last year apparently with a torn labrum in his shoulder. Tough as heck. Coming back to 100% gives you that passing, rushing. I like what they did in the portal to address losing Eric Singleton, their receiver, to Auburn. Also, I trust Brent Key to figure out the offensive line. He's an offensive line coach. They've had good offensive lines the last couple of years. They'll figure it out. They got better. They got better on defense last year too. I think Blake Gideon, I think he's a rising star. I think he'll keep building on what they did last year. So I'm talking myself into Georgia Tech finishing much higher than 5th in the conference for sure.
My order right now would be Clemson 1, Miami 2, Georgia Tech 3, Louisville 4, SMU 5. And because we're about to talk Duke here and Florida State and Pittsburgh, I don't think those 3 – I think that top 5 is on its own tier. Really, Clemson's on its own, but I think those top 5 are separate from everybody else. And I honestly, it's like I'm giving Miami the benefit of the doubt based purely on talent over Georgia Tech, because I like the Georgia Tech build much better. And I guarantee you by the time I put out my final preseason top 25 or whatever, the week before the season starts, I probably have Georgia Tech at 2.
If you just look at, you could probably do this for a lot of teams, but I think one of the reasons to like Georgia Tech is just look at a projected depth chart, and there's a lot of seniors. There's a lot of guys who have played at Georgia Tech the last couple of years, and they've done a good job of supplementing through the portal at here and there. So the schedule is tricky, but I think it is also manageable for Georgia Tech to get to the ACC championship game.
Duke at number 6, 7 returning starters on offense, which does not include, of course, the big name transfer Darian Mensah at quarterback from Tulane, which they will go back into that building and play, which is just fascinating. 6 returning starters on defense, 4 offensive linemen back. Number 1 in the conference in getting after the quarterback last year for Duke. Look, I believe in Manny Diaz and his ability. They have 5 seniors out of those 6 returning starters on defense. 5 of them are seniors. They're going to be good on defense, and the quarterback looks good. The schedule's harder. They've got more difficult games in the non-conference. I guess maybe this is unfair to Duke, but just the replicating what you did, it just feels harder at Duke. And so maybe they are as good, and maybe the record isn't as good. but I think they're the best of the rest in the conference, but I can't move them up higher than 6. I don't know. Maybe they are better than SMU, and I'm not giving them enough credit.
I would have a line after Georgia Tech. Like, I think there's Georgia Tech, there's a gap, and then Duke would be the next team. SMU was the biggest surprise, but Duke wasn't that far behind, just given preseason expectations, what they lost, what they brought back. Manny Diaz did a great job last year. I think defensively, with 6 starters back, they're still going to be one of the best defenses in the ACC. The question, I think, is how good is Darian Mensah, and like what's the level that he could raise this offense? Malik Murphy was okay. I think Mensah could be much better. They do have some turnover at receiver. They're going to have to navigate. To your point, also some tricky road games in the ACC, Syracuse, Cal, obviously the big one at Clemson. They play North Carolina. I think much like SMU, there is plenty of staying power here, especially if you've upgraded at quarterback. You keep your defense among the best in the conference, and you win those 50-50 toss-up games in the ACC. You could kind of stay in contention into November for the ACC championship game appearance. So I expect a little bit of regression, but I still think that they're right there in that 8-win range potentially.
If they can replicate, it would be. And here's what's funny: like Manny Diaz didn't do a terrible job at Miami.
Yeah,
like, he wasn't let go because he was terrible. It was because they thought they had a chance to get their boy. And
right.
And Cristobal's been great, but he's kind of the opposite of Manny Diaz in terms of philosophy and structure. So I don't know. I think Duke's one of those football teams that's going to be really good, and no one will unfortunately pay attention to it.
They'll be paying attention in September when they play Illinois and Tulane, right? That'll be a good barometer.
I hope you're right.
I mean, it's going to be
I'm
a
just
good
saying, like,
yeah.
What I mean is they were the quietest 9-win team maybe in all of college football last year.
That is, yeah, for sure.
Speaking of the opposite of quiet, Florida State at number 7, 1 returning starter on offense, 5 on defense. Just changes everywhere. Change, which I give him credit for being willing to blow the whole thing up and be like, oh, that was the worst season in school history. We've got to change things. Gus Malzahn comes back in with Thomas Castellanos. I did not realize that Castellanos did he commit to him at UCF?
Mm-hmm.
So I think Gus Malzahn is bringing the old like 2013 Auburn, Nick Marshall, like put a bunch of players in weird places and do fun things. I think he's bringing the Nick Marshall style offense back to Florida State, and I think that's going to be good enough to win a lot more games. I don't know about the rest of the team, though, which is crazy because they've portaled so well in the past and also portaled horribly just last year. So I don't know what to make of Florida State. I do think at 7, that's a big hat tip to progress in Tallahassee.
I think Florida State will be better. I think the question is how much better. I mean, they can't get any worse than 2-10 last season. I also think there was a sort of change in philosophy maybe on the portal. They went out and got production proven people. Maybe the ceiling isn't very high, but they didn't bank on potential hitting. They went and got guys who have done it. Like you see this on the offensive line, bringing in a couple of different seniors to start. Castellanos is fascinating because I don't think he fits everybody's offense, but I think he fits this offense well because he's not very big. Maybe he doesn't throw as well as some of the other guys.
He's Nick Marshall.
Right, exactly. He gives you
that
mobility to work in this style of offense. So they have just blown up every offensive line, receiving core. I actually, of the coordinator hires, I actually like Tony White, their defensive coordinator, a lot more. There probably are they're greater, but both sides of the ball have question marks coming into this year. But I do think between Tony White and some of their portal additions, I think their defense will also just play a lot better. There were a lot of, I think, there was a lot of disappointment after missing the playoff. There was also kind of just a weird feeling hanging over this team at times last year. So I think a little bit more motivation by hitting the reset, maybe some leadership changes. I think it pays off for Florida State. I don't think they make the ACC championship game, but I think they are better. Get back to that 7-5 type of range for this team this year.
First of all, I think everything's a little weird in Tallahassee, just in general.
Yeah.
It's always a little weird in general, even when things are going great. It's a little weird. Yeah, I mean, it throwing it all out like that is both risky and admirable all at the same time. And it's just Florida State, and I don't know how you feel about this because I know you've got some background with this team, but like Florida State should not be the portal team.
No,
it shouldn't be. They should be the Clemson, where they are dominating high school recruiting with a big brand and great development. Like that's like that. They shouldn't have to do what they're doing. So it's one of those where we're like, I remember you and I doing a show being like, Mike Norvell, one of the best portal coaches in all of college football. And now we're like, whoa.
Doesn't this also get at the issue though?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Doesn't Mike Norvell need to win in the high school level recruiting? Like they are doing a better job, it looks like, this offseason, but trying to rely on resetting a team, bringing in a handful of difference makers every year from the portal is not a sustainable thing. I mean, there may have been maybe like a market inefficiency at first, like the portal, like everybody trying to figure out, like Florida State hit it. Now everybody adjusted. And now it's just, it's that you have to adapt. And so that's getting back to high school recruiting.
I don't know. And I don't know Gus Malzahn's ultimate, like, what is his goal in life? Like, is this his last stop? Is this like just because he doesn't want to recruit? Like, why does he take this job after being a head coach? And you see this now all the time. Like, coaches are willing to be coordinators for a little less money, less pressure, less work, more fun. But you got to deliver on the things that Gus Malzahn is good at, which is a big power running game with a good offensive line. And I think hopefully with Tony White coming in as the coordinator, you can fix the defensive line where they do have some personnel that you got to like. So the question is, like, does Florida State get back to being mean along the line of scrimmage? And if that happens, then I think we're going to see the improvement that we expect. So, and I think it's possible. So
I think Gus has said in interviews this offseason that he was going to probably retire. Like he was on the hot seat at UCF. Yeah. So, and he and Norvell go back all the way to like Tulsa. Right. So there's
he's like, hey, so I don't have to recruit and I can just, I can run bubble screens with Thomas Castellanos. All right, we're going to run the ball and then we're going to throw bubble screens. And I think that's all he wants. That's all he wants to do. So I like it. All right.
That's good.
Number 8, Pittsburgh. This is one of those teams, Lasso, that I want to buy so badly, but I just have I have 10 years of like probably not going to get it done.
They just won the ACC with Kenny Pickett, a quarterback, though.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. Fair counterpoint. 7-0, of course, last year to start the season. If you forgot, they finished 0-6. Woof. That, of course, a big part of that was their dynamic duo in the backfield, Eli Holstein and Des Reed at running back. Those two injured down the stretch. Reed, fascinating. Like, what didn't I believe colleague David Hale said that 12 different teams tried to sign him out of the portal, and he went back to Pittsburgh. So look, those two in the backfield alone are as good as anybody in this conference at those two positions. And they were very, very good. Like Holstein was so much better than I expected in the beginning of the season, and the offense totally changed. So Cade Bell's back, 3 offensive linemen, a couple of receivers as well. They got some pieces on defense as well, which you generally trust Pat Narduzzi to develop, in particular defensive line. So 7 starters back on both sides of the ball. That's a lot of returning talent for a team that also has a quarterback and an established culture with a head coach who's been there a long time. So there's a lot to like about this Pittsburgh team.
There is, and I think there could be an argument for stability. You kind of know what you're getting out of this Pitt team. I think Narduzzi's going to piece together a good defense, and I think the return of Holstein and Des Reed, they should be much better than they were at the end of the last season on offense. I think every time I look at this Pitt team, it's like, okay, if Holstein's better, Reed stays healthy, they've got experience on the offensive line, they've got experience on defense. I just wonder, like, what is the upside for this team? Like, is that stability? Is it being solid enough to go into that top 5? I'm not sure, but this team feels very solid. Also, just want to give a little bit of a hat tip because Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles at linebacker, 2 of the best linebackers in the country that probably nobody talks about, one of the better tandems in the country. So Narduzzi doing a good job developing on defense. And if Holstein can stay healthy, the backyard brawl is in Morgantown. They get Florida State on the road. They play into the season, Notre Dame, at Georgia Tech, and Miami. A very difficult close to the season. But I think they bounce back, probably exceed their win total. I don't know they're good enough, though, to get into that top 4 or so to be in the mix to make the ACC championship.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. 5.1 yards per play on defense last year, 4th among all ACC teams. So you mentioned the 2 linebackers in Lewis and Biles that are great. And that's just... It's like, you know what? Like you look up every year and you're like, oh, Pittsburgh, they were pretty good on defense.
Yeah.
It's like how it works at the end of the year. And I would have loved to have seen what that offense would have looked like and what that record would have finished like had they all been like if they stay healthy and they go 9-3. Can you imagine the hype around this team this year? It would have been it would have been big time. The exact opposite of what Pittsburgh is doing is next on our list. Number 9, North Carolina. 4 returning starters on offense, 2 on defense, 40 new players, including the quarterback. The coach is 73 years old. They got a couple offensive linemen, but giant questions basically everywhere. I have no idea what to make of this roster. I have no idea what to make of Belichick's impact on the field. It sounds like he is not, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but he's not been the general manager type that he was in the NFL. He's kind of outsourced that to the GM at North Carolina, which is fascinating to me. So maybe he's finally said, like, no, I'm going to let someone else shop for the groceries, but I'm going to be one of the best chefs that's ever lived, which is what he was for most of his career up until the last couple of years when the Patriots were awful. So elite coach. I think he does make a huge difference developing, in particular, defensive players, having those crazy, weird scheme ideas in the moment that he can just pull on and, like, throw out a crazy, like, we're going to have no down linemen against somebody and just be like, what are you going to do with this one 18-year-old quarterback who's never seen this kind of defensive formation before? So I just want to know what kind of impact he can have with that expertise in the game situation. And I think it's pretty good, but I don't know if it's good enough to overcome the massive overhaul of the roster.
Poor Josh Hoover from TCU. He gets to be the guinea pig for everybody playing this North Carolina defense in the season opener on a Monday night where the whole nation is going to be watching. Honestly, the right answer with North Carolina is there are so many unknowns here, but they're arguably the most intriguing team in the country this year because of Belichick and just to see the type of impact that he's going to have, but also the unknowns and the question marks that they have. I do like the Gio Lopez pickup at quarterback. It was after the spring, so it's a short runway to get him ready. But you could go down the positions. It's offensive line transfers, receiver transfers, defensive transfers everywhere. How this all comes together is a massive unknown. And I don't think talent has been an issue at North Carolina. I think getting the most out of the talent has been an issue. I think there's an argument that Belichick will get more out of the roster. I think the question is, what is exactly the upside here? And preseason all-conference teams aren't necessarily the best judge of talent. Just because one team has more doesn't mean they're better than the other. It was hard to make a case that North Carolina should have a lot of guys in consideration for first or second team all ACC coming into the year. So that is going to probably require Belichick to get the most plus some out of this roster. However, every discussion about this team has to come back to the schedule because TCU in the opener, Clemson on October 4th. They play Duke and they play at NC State later in the year. There is a good chance that they could easily rack up 8-9 victories against the schedule. I don't think they will necessarily, but that schedule is very favorable.
Yeah, no question about that. So I want to include NC State, which is next on our list at 10. It's sort of like I don't want to say like the opposite of North Carolina, because I really am interested by CJ Bailey, the quarterback who was a freshman last year, who showed some signs of being pretty darn good. Six starters on offense, 4 on defense. Like this, the model of consistency for NC State, and no real upside. They're not going to win 10 games because that's not what happens in Raleigh, but they're going to be 7, 8, or 9 wins every single year. They've got a decent little quarterback. I think Bailey coming back is really intriguing as a player this year. The problem is sort of where's the big trend line here? You're starting to replace a bunch of coordinators. You're starting to, no more Tony Gibson, right? Like this used to be a program that would just churn out NFL prospects that were way above sort of the recruiting grade, a great developmental program. And I'm just curious if that stability is starting to crack a little bit at NC State. And so if they are better than North Carolina, I think it will be because of CJ Bailey and because of that stability. If they are not, it's because this whole thing that Dave Doran's been doing for a decade is starting to trend in the wrong direction, if that makes sense.
It does. I think if you want to take the optimistic route here, CJ Bailey in his second season, I think is going to take a step forward. I like their skill talent at running back and receiver. They've got some experience on the offensive line, but some new faces need to emerge at a couple spots. I'm a little, I guess I'm just okay with the Kurt Roper hire at offensive coordinator.
It's all right.
It's like, same thing on defense. DJ Elliott, I mean, he's been around for a while. It's okay. I'm not particularly overwhelmed by it. They do have some questions on defense, particularly in the secondary, where they're turning over a lot of personnel. Also, if you want to be maybe optimistic and look at the stats last year, 23 lost turnovers. That was among the most in the ACC. So there could be some, positive, I guess regression off of that to where it's not so bad. Their schedule, I do think, is fairly manageable. At Duke, at Notre Dame, at Pitt, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and North Carolina all come to Raleigh, one of the best home environments in the ACC. So Bailey hits. You solidify your defense. We've got them 10th in the conference. I think they could easily exceed that 6-7 record last year. Dave Doran has had just 2 losing seasons since 2014. So to your point, they've been rock solid. But what is the upside here?
Right. First losing season since 2019. 2 new coordinators, like the quarterback. Trajectory is the question. As I started this, 20, almost 30 points a game allowed last year. 15th in the conference. Only better than Wake Forest and Stanford. That's not good territory for a defense that has been. I mean, look, Peyton Wilson's great, but like they used to just like put 2 or 3 guys in the NFL every year, and they're just not doing it right now, at least from a developmental standpoint. So, all right, NC State, I like that team. I'm kind of like cautiously optimistic, but I want to see what happens with the rest of the coaching staff. Virginia Tech at 11, 2 returning starters, just 2 on offense and only 2 on defense. And I'll let you go through all of this because I got a lot of notes written down here. 5 new offensive linemen is one big one that I wrote down. Here's my ultimate question about Virginia Tech. Which direction are they going?
Yeah, I was going to say, like NC State, like we talked about, like the trend line there. Like, is that the same question we could have here with Virginia Tech?
Well, maybe. I think there's more of a downward trajectory with NC State in general. That could be fixed this year.
Mm-hmm.
But literally, I don't know what Virginia Tech is. Are they trending up? Are they trending down? Which direction are they going? Is Drones going to be fully healthy? The offensive line's totally new. I literally have no idea. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some of these ACC teams, your guess is as good as mine about what we're going to see this year. I think if like to be Mr. Optimistic here about Virginia Tech in 2023, it felt like, okay, they started to turn a corner under Brent Pry. Like Kyron Drones hit, they finished the season playing well. Maybe all the injuries caught up to him last year, or to be negative, you could look at it as that's really one small sample size, and the other 2 seasons are kind of the basic trend line here for Virginia Tech. Like you said, there is turnover everywhere. I mean, the offensive line, 2 new coordinators, running backs, receivers, defensive line, secondary, you name it. There's new faces. I think the debate on Virginia Tech to me is like, can you keep Kyron Drones healthy? And how good actually is he able to produce over a full season? And just looking at their schedule, they play South Carolina and Vanderbilt first month of the season. They could easily be 0-2 right out of the gate. Then they go to NC State, to Georgia Tech, play Louisville, at Florida State, Miami, at Virginia to close the year. That's pretty tough. So optimistic would say Drones hits, defense is Pry, and the new defensive coordinator hit it off, and maybe they just overcome. Yeah. The other side of me goes, there's a lot of new here against a pretty tough schedule.
11th seems about right, but I almost could argue that that's a little bit of brand bump there. Like there's a brand bump with Virginia Tech. Like you could make the case that they belong at 13 based on all that new you're talking about. It doesn't mean that they couldn't be better than that. They absolutely could if all that stuff hits and Drone stays healthy. But man, I just have no direction. I have no idea what direction they're going. It's like I was always good with patience around this. Like, hey, let Pride do the rebuild thing and build the Hokie brand in the state. And Virginia is such a territorial recruiting state, right? The 2 programs are always going against each other. And Virginia Tech has mostly won that recruiting battle for the last 25 years. So I felt like he was doing that early. And all right, this is going to be a slow build. And then they took a huge step back. And you're like, what are we doing? Preseason top 25 last year, right? Like right on the fringe, like 25, 25th, something like that.
What's your confidence level that maybe Virginia could finish ahead of Virginia Tech in the ACC standings.
Not a lot. I don't have a lot of faith in Virginia I'm not buying stock in Tony Elliott right now. But the schedule, to your point, the schedule's easier. So
could both Virginia teams have a new coach next year?
I think it's possible.
Yeah,
I think it's possible. Yeah, for sure. Boston College is 12th, 5 returning starters on offense, 6 on defense. So there you go. Grayson James, can he win the job? We'll see at quarterback. 3 new offensive linemen. Back 7 on defense will be good. But Clemson, Louisville, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and SMU all on the schedule. And I just don't know. I think Bill O'Brien's a pretty good coach, but lots of challenges at Boston College.
Yeah, a lot of challenges, and we'll start with that schedule because I think that's where this Boston College team, like any debate about it, like it is entirely possible they could be a better team at the end of the 2025 than they were in 2024. The schedule is just hard. Also, the quarterback battle is pretty intriguing. Grayson James ended up taking over for Thomas Castellanos last year. Dylan Lonergan transferred in from Alabama. Those two are neck and neck in the preseason to start. Maybe that's good. They have 2 quarterbacks they feel good with, but nobody's kind of claimed the job yet. I like the skill talent. I think on defense, losing was it Ezeraku is a pretty big loss for a defense that was just okay last year. So I think if Boston College sort of overachieves here, it's quarterbacks end up being the battle ends up producing somebody who produces at a high level. And I think you kind of trust O'Brien to just maybe squeeze a victory or 2 out of this team somewhere. Maybe that they're an underdog in. I think if you ask me about a schedule projection, I'd probably go like 5-7 right now. Yeah. But I think maybe O'Brien can get them to 6-6 and they sneak back into a bowl game.
He's just one of those guys that's feels like he's so good at being just slightly better than average.
Yeah.
Like I had a lot of 9-7 teams in the NFL. I had a lot of 8-4 teams at Penn State. I just feel like he's a guy who's going to be 7-5 all the time.
And if you have a quarterback battle, I think we trust O'Brien to probably push the right buttons there.
And probably if you can win the AFC South with TJ Yates, you can probably develop a quarterback at Boston College.
Sure.
Syracuse, last but not least, here 13 in our list. Talk about a drop for Fran Brown in year number 2. 2 starters on offense, 3 on defense. Just a whole lot of nothing. 2 offensive linemen are their 2 returning starters on offense. Just a whole lot of question marks on offense. Nasty schedule. Elijah Robinson's your defensive coordinator. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this team. I really like Fran Brown as a coach, but this is the area of the ACC and the Big 12 where you just put your hands in the air and you're like, I have no clue.
I think we talked about BC, any kind of conversation with Syracuse this offseason pretty much starts with their schedule. I think it's 11 bowl teams.
Ooh.
Tennessee, a pretty good UConn team in non-conference play, and also they get Notre Dame at the end of the year. They play Miami, North Carolina, Georgia Tech, and Clemson and SMU.
Yeah.
Probably going to be hard to get back to a bowl game. You lose Kyle McCord, ultra prolific last year, 2 transfers, Stephen Jelly and Ricky Collins battling for the job. I still think skill talent's probably okay. A lot of new faces, though, in the offensive line, and certainly a lot of new faces on defense. So if they get back to a bowl game, I mean, Fran Brown might be one of the top contenders for ACC Coach of the Year, just given the personnel losses and schedule. But I think there is definitely some regression here, just based upon how challenging the schedule is after 10 wins, losing a lot, and a much more difficult slate this year.
Yeah, no question about it. There's your ACC. You got some fascinating sort of power structure changes happening on the West Coast. You have a fascinating case study in how to elevate your program with the new rules and with revenue from SMU. You've got a historically great program that had one of the worst seasons in the history of their program. It's easy for me to say. Florida State. You have Bill Belichick coaching at North Carolina. The teams that we really like are going to be very, very quiet in the preseason. No one's going to be talking about Georgia Tech and Louisville and Duke. Those are not going to be teams that get a lot of headlines. Clemson's going to be under a microscope. Miami is a fascinating case study in coaching and talent. The whole thing is I don't know how good this league is. I don't know how talented these teams are, and I don't know how good they're going to be nationally relative to championship caliber teams outside of Clemson. But don't tell me there's no storylines on this. You got coaches at Pittsburgh and NC State that have been around a decade that have established cultures. There's a lot of good and very different storylines in this conference.
Absolutely. You mentioned Belichick, but also just, I mean, the NFL kind of storylines in the conference with Andrew Luck. You got Ron Rivera, you got Bill O'Brien, you've got a ton of just intriguing like NFL connections throughout the conference. You got Florida State trying to bounce back. It feels like there's one national championship contender and some playoff contenders and a bunch of really solid teams that fill in, college, the kind of middle of college football. So even at the bottom, like you said with Stanford, and also I'm interested to see what Jake Dicker does at Wake. So there's no shortage of storylines here.
No question about it. Buy that magazine, athlonsports.com, please. We got the SEC coming up and then our actual college football playoff predictions before week 0 starts, which is going to be a ton of fun. So college football is here. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to buy me an EPL magazine. How about that? Did you cover a little bit of La Liga in there too? Because I want a little bit of Barca. I want to talk a little Lamine Yamal as well. Is that in there?
You're talking to the. I don't know nothing about soccer, to be honest with you. So
you don't know that Christian Pulisic is playing for AC Milan.
No, I don't.
Who just got Modric from Real Madrid? Come on, dude. You don't know about this stuff?
No, the only transfers I know were like late movement in the portal that just happened. I don't know anything about this, so it's why I need to read it, obviously, right?
I'm excited about that. Yeah. I'm excited about that. Athlonsports.com for all your magazine needs, and of course, YouTube. You can look at all those magazines. You can look at my facial reactions to all of Steven's picks. You can look at his helmets. You can look at his old school retro ACC T-shirt with Maryland on it. It's vintage. It's vintage from a few decades ago. And a very interesting league. How good is Clemson? How good's the middle of this thing? Who plays in the conference championship game against Clemson? All really fun stuff in the ACC. And as long as we've got the ACC, let's enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I was also going to say, a little
parting shot there.
Yeah, well, ACC Atlantic Coast Conference, it really goes. It's pretty much national at this point with Cal and Stanford in there. So
yeah, no question about it. All right, Lasso, everybody follow him on the all the socials. You can get to him there. You can get to me at Braden Gall. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you next time.